finance.
Warren Ingram talking retirement annuities this evening. Now, let's just do a quick little starter pack on retirement annuities, if you would, Warren Ingram. These are very cool, very useful, long-term savings devices aimed to help us save for our old age.
Exactly, and it's something that Treasury over the years has really pushed to try and help give us carrots to save more. And one of the big carrots is that you get a big tax deduction when you contribute money to a retirement annuity. So in other words, let's say you earn 100 Rand a month. If you contribute 20 Rand a month to your retirement annuity, then you will only be taxed on the 80 Rand a month that you are earning without the money that you've put into the retirement annuity. So you get a huge break on tax deductions going in. Also, when you're in the retirement annuity, all of the growth inside the retirement annuity attracts no tax. You don't pay dividends tax, income tax, capital gains tax inside the retirement annuity. When you do retire it though, and it becomes a living annuity, for example, then you'll pay income tax on the money that you draw every month. And then last one is that if you're lucky enough to have enough money that you don't spend your whole annuity in your lifetime, then the money that goes to your children, as an example, will be free of capital gains tax, executors' fees, estate duty, the whole treat. So it's a really effective vehicle for long-term saving.
There's a massive incentive there then to save as much as you possibly can into a retirement annuity. And there are some very wealthy people who go, oh, that'd be great. But you can only put a maximum of 350,000 Rand a year into a retirement annuity. If you earn a very little bit, you could put 27.5% of what you earn, but it's a maximum of 350,000 Rand a year into a retirement annuity to get these benefits, right?
For 100%. And for most South Africans, that means that they can contribute nearly a third of their salary to a retirement fund and get that huge tax break.
Okay. But, as we know, we're not particularly good at doing it. Now, all of this is great. All of the growth in the fund is tax-free. It's free of CGT and estate duty on your death. And that's all really good and positive stuff. But what happens if you've bought a dud of a retirement annuity?
And I think that's where the problem lies, is that, RAs in the past and possibly to this day attracted really bad reputation and very often justified, because people were sold very expensive retirement annuities, and the insurance company and the agent that sold that were paid massive upfront commissions. They would sell sort of a 25-year-old person this RA, and then earn commission as if that person was going to make the investment until they're age 55 or 65. And so, there are some of these RAs that have just done really badly, and there's no chance that, that people will get fantastic growth out of those, and they don't even know exactly what they're invested in, even to the point of exactly what their annual fees are. They're really opaque and kind of lousy. And so you get stuck with this RA, and I think it's important to note it's not a kind of a life sentence that you have to stay in this RA with this dud provider that's given you that RA. You can transfer them. In legal terms, it's called a Section 14 transfer, which means you move it from one RA provider to another, and you don't pay tax as if you've cashed that in. So that's an important thing, because you don't want to cash in your retirement savings. You just want to move it to a more effective place.
But if the company and the person who sold it to me have charged me huge amounts up front, they're going to want to recoup those huge amounts, and they're going to recoup them from me in a penalty, aren't they?
Unfortunately, and I think that's really the big issue here, is that the penalties have been capped, but unfortunately at very high levels. If off the top of my head, I think it's 25% of the value of the RA is the maximum that they can charge. What's important to note is if you've been in it for a while, that RA for a while, you might find that penalty drops, because it does drop the closer and closer you get to your retirement age, that age 55. So it's very important before you do anything to get what they call a Section 14 quote from the life assurance company, or it's usually going to be a life assurance company that sold you that kind of an RA, to find out what that penalty is. And then
okay, how then do you, in your own mind, work out whether or not it's worth moving from an old style, clunky, expensive retirement annuity product into a new style retirement annuity product? Because if you're giving up 25% of the 100 that's in there already, the new RA is going to have to work blimmin' hard to play catch up and then outperform in whatever time you've got left until retirement.
Agreed. And to me, I think, straight off the bat, if you're going to be stung with a 25% penalty, please don't do that. Don't take the move unless it's a very small rand amount. In other words, yes, it's 25%, but actually it's a very old, policy that you were only contributing $150 a month, and actually you earn a much bigger salary. In which case, you might just from a rand point of view be prepared to take the knock. But it's very difficult to recover a 25% penalty like that. To try and get proper capital growth that will be reasonably certain of recovering that loss and still grow and still get you ahead. I think it's very difficult. So typically, if I meet someone that's in this kind of a situation, I would say to them that you would look at, swallowing a penalty of around 6 or 7% if you are, let's say, 10 years from retirement. If you're a lot younger, then maybe you can go 8 or 10% as a max. But I think to me, someone taking a 10% penalty on their own savings, I could only justify it to myself if they were somewhere around 30 or younger. But beyond that, I don't think that the penalty is worthwhile.
Okay. Now, explain to me, please, because there are products nowadays which allow you to switch between companies. You could be on what's called a platform, and you might have a Coronation RA and might want to switch to Alan Gray, or you might have an Alan Gray RA and want to switch it to Coronation or another product provider. And that should be fairly easy.
Yeah, and I think that's really the recommendation as well, is if you are stuck in one of those old clunky ones and you do take the penalty, then whatever you do, make sure that you now go into an RA that's offered by a unit trust company, and that's really what we're talking about here. Because typically they'll offer you a service where they're not going to charge you some kind of an upfront fee at all, and they're also not going to charge you a penalty if you move. The only fees that they're going to charge you, kind of to use cell phone language, would be pay-as-you-go fees. You would pay a monthly fee to the platform, and I'll explain that now, and then also a monthly fee for the actual unit trust that you're in. And to me, that's the very best way that you would go if you are going to take that knock and try and recoup that penalty. So what happens nowadays is you get companies that will offer an administrative service, and they have to meet certain regulatory requirements, and typically those are called a platform. And quite a lot of the big unit trust companies decided, years ago, that they don't want to run through a life assurance company which meets all these regulatory requirements. They'll go and meet those requirements on their own, and they're gonna subsidize the cost of that administration themselves. And so they launched these administrative platforms. The jargon for them is a LISP, Linked Investment Service Provider.
Is that what a LISP is? Okay, I've got you.
And in the old days, the idea was that you could go to one place and you could buy 5 or 6 different, or as many as you wanted, different companies' unit trusts, but you could get them all from one place. And so there's an element of attraction from the point of view that at least you can consolidate your investments, get an overall view of what you've got, and not have your all your investments pulling in different directions, and actually you go nowhere. So that was the original basis for those platforms, and nowadays they have become a bit more cost effective. They were very expensive at the start, but very often you will get those platforms at anything from 0.5% a year down to 0. And the trick here is if you're using a unit trust company's own platform, the likelihood is that they won't charge you for the administration. They'll only charge you a unit trust management fee. So it becomes important to consider, to say, well, okay, I'll go to this unit trust company and I'll only use their unit trusts, and then I'm not paying this extra 0.5% a year or whatever the administration fee is.
But can I switch between providers?
You can.
And can I do that also cost-free?
You can, and I think that's the important thing. So you can do 2 things. One, you can use the platform and say, okay, I'm going to go from Coronation to Alan Gray, but I'm going to stay on one platform, or I'm going to move my whole Alan Gray RA to Coronation as an example, and you can do that. That's no problem at all. And those unit trust companies are not going to charge you an exit penalty, to move. So you've got none of that concern.
So then, my crucial final question to you, and this is an important one, is: under what circumstances should I then, if it's not going to cost me anything, it's a little bit of admin, but I would go from one institution to another institution. I've got one institution's general equity fund or their balanced fund, and I decide I've looked back 3 years and company A has, over the last 3 years, has outperformed company B. You know what? I'm going to move my money. And that can be a good thing. Or it can be an expensive mistake.
It can be, and I think that's really, I would be really careful just to move for short-term performance reasons. To me, I'd be more concerned if, for example, you were in one fund management business and they lost a whole bunch of their managers, and you weren't sure anymore that they would be able to deliver on their long-term performance. But there so many times we've seen where fund managers go through a lean patch of 2 or 3 years, and they lose a lot of assets just at about the time when their performance really kicks in and actually rewards the patient investors that stayed. So I would want to understand why my fund is not performing before I simply made the switch. I think we're probably in that stage now. The JSE hasn't done much. Nothing's really grown over the last year or two, and there might be 1 or 2 very big star performer unit trusts, but the rest haven't done well. And to suddenly switch out of them now, I think would be a mistake, because the likelihood is that we'll be switching just before these guys recover and give us great performance again.
And that's the point I want to make, is before you do something hasty, understand what has caused the performance in your fund. Maybe you look at the performance of your fund and it's been really, really good and you're tempted to stick around. You've got to be careful of doing that, however, because maybe the fund was structured really well to perform in the last couple of years and is going to underperform in the next few, or it may be vice versa. And that's a really hard call to make, Mr. Ingram.
Agreed, and I think it's one of those things where patient investors very often get the greatest benefit by doing absolutely nothing. And I wouldn't say that they do nothing in terms of reviewing what they've got and doing their own homework. They'll do that extensively, but they'll be really slow to change and make sure that they've got all the facts as to why they want to move. And performance should be towards the bottom of your list of priorities when you make that decision. And I know that sounds strange. We all want our investments to grow all the time, but if you're paying an active manager, someone to try and do better than what the markets are doing, then you've got to give them a chance to do that, and that takes time.
There we go. My thanks to you, Warren Ingram, this evening, personal financial advisor and executive director at Galileo Capital. Hopefully that has helped you through the really complicated, thorny and deeply emotional morass of what to do if you've got a lousy retirement annuity.